Welcome to the Coherence Project. I'm Dr. Tyler Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Amy Gunderson-Lewis.
This is a space for conversations in human potential,
where we explore how people evolve, how patterns reorganize, and what it looks like when you start living from a greater level of awareness. So good to be here with you this morning, Tyler.
Yes.
Today, I really would love to talk about nervous system, regulation, coherence, how it shapes your life in reality. So before we get into all that, the first thing I really want to talk about and explore is innate intelligence. What is innate intelligence? And when did you first realize that there was an innate intelligence that guides and organizes your life?
There's so much that we can cover in this topic, and I'm so ready to explore this with you, especially today, because in talking about nervous system health, which is all-encompassing, talking about innate intelligence and innate healing, like that's everything. This was paradigm shifting in my life to just begin to understand like what that is, to learn about it was huge, and it completely like reshaped and redefined the trajectory of my life. And so just to touch on this briefly, innate intelligence, what that is, it's this recognition that there is this inborn, ingrained capacity for our cells, our bodies, our life to want to heal, to want to express. For example, we have these trillions of individual living beings called cells that are all like coalescing and working together, having their own biochemical processes and genetic expressions and proteins that they're building, yet they're all cohesively working together to organize your body and your life. And that information wise was like, okay, pretty neat. But then there was this moment where it really all radically flipped and changed for me. So my whole life I've been fascinated with healing. I mean, I remember, moments growing up where somebody would get injured and I got to, go help clean off the wound, put the Band-Aid on it and things like that. And that was just always something I was really fascinated by. So I knew early on that I wanted to do something to help people in that way. And so my trajectory in life, I went to college for pre-med, Hendrix College in Arkansas, where I wanted to go be a medical doctor because that's how I felt I could best serve people. And that I was a biochemistry major and molecular biology, where I got to learn all about the body systems, the cell biology and the immune system and all of these things, because in understanding all of that, that's how I was going to be able to help support and serve people. Because when things go wrong, you can fix it. I can help make it better. But there was this moment that I'll never forget in my journey through pre-med and in one of my classes, because we had been studying cell biology, we had been studying tissues, we've been studying, biochemistry and all of these things. And it was like, okay, cool. Learning about cells and tissues and genetics and all of that stuff is always really fascinating. But I remember it was studying the immune system that all of a sudden my mind just like opened. Because up until that point, I was looking at cells and tissues as just these, basic, mindless things, components, parts that somehow work together so long as all these different pathways are operating. And then that's what builds the body that allows us to be alive. But when studying the immune system, all of a sudden I realized, oh wow, there's something so much more beautiful going on here. Because when studying the immune system, what I learned is this, your immune system is this organization of all these cells that kind of live a bit independent of all the other cells, organs, and tissues. And it's like these cells are kind of moving on their own all over the body, and they're like overwatching what's happening in the cells and tissues of our body. And it was just so cool and fascinating to learn about this, because as you're watching the immune cells and how they're like crawling on top of other cells and they're attacking the bacteria and the viruses, or like cancer cells and eating all of that stuff, all of a sudden I saw that there was this, that a cell was alive. I know it's weird, but the cell was alive. It had a thought process. It had a way of being. It was like, It's so weird. I don't know why this is coming through, but it's like watching the animals on the Serengeti. You could like see the different things going on, and these cells were like the lions, attacking, the different things that didn't belong there. And like it opened my mind. I realized, oh my God, that the cells are intelligent. And then when I got to have that experience in studying, wow, how the cells are operating and how just the body operates, and you learn like what the body needs in order to function at a really high level. All of a sudden, my mind was blown even further, because I feel like I was conditioned to think that the body was inherently just dumb and things break down. So whenever you get a bacteria or a virus, then you get sick. And maybe at most when you get an injury, the body somehow brings that back together. But I really was thinking at this level of, well, we get sick because, we catch a cold, we go outside, our immune system goes down, or, a bacteria gets in and invades us, and then, we break down in some way, shape, or form. But then when you study the immune system, you're like, how do we ever get sick? There's no way we can ever get sick, because this whole system is so brilliant and intelligent. And all of a sudden that got me thinking, well, if we can learn how to support the system, support the immune system to where it can do its job the best it possibly can. The immune system is involved in clearing out bacteria and viruses. It's involved in identifying cancer cells and killing the cells that aren't working together with the rest. What if we give that system everything that it needs in order to better organize our bodies? And now all of a sudden we get to express health. So there was something there. There was a shift there. And so then I started getting more involved in like natural medicine and learning more about nutrition, because I didn't grow up that way. It just wasn't how I was necessarily raised. But getting to learn about this later, it was so fascinating. If we can just get the right nutrition, the right vitamins, the right minerals, the right nutrients, whatever, now these systems can operate at the highest level possible. Again, how do we ever get sick? What I learned is that was kind of a fundamental shift between something that in medicine is called germ theory, and more natural medicine called host theory, which germ theory states that we get sick because we have a foreign invader that invades our body, like a bacteria or a virus or a cancer cell. Something gets in and it attacks us, and then we break down. So if we can kill the thing, then we're okay. But host theory says something radically different. It says that we're always exposed to bacteria, we're always exposed to viruses, we always have cancer cells that are producing and being created in our body. However, there's this beautiful intelligence that's going on, organizing our bodies, organizing our immune systems, organizing our lives, that when it's able to do its job effectively, it identifies what doesn't belong, is able to eliminate that, and then also stimulate the healing and repair of tissues that could have potentially gotten damaged. And then all of a sudden, it's not about what germs are we preventing from getting into us, but how can we promote being the healthiest, most abundant, connected, well-organized, intelligent system that we can be, to create a buffer, a boundary between us and our environment. And so that's where it began. Then through a series of events, I know, to make it a short story long here, but it's just everything. My mom had an injury in her foot. She then went to a chiropractor in her hometown, and I was going through this paradigmatic shift in how I think and process. And I was talking to her about these things. And she's like, you know what? I think you would really like to come meet this chiropractor that I started seeing. Really fascinating guy. He's helping me a lot with my plantar fasciitis. And I think it would be cool. Next time you come down, you should come and meet him. And so a couple weeks later, I came down, and it just so happened that he had a wellness talk going on in his office for all of his patients. And so I attended this class. And then another significant shift in that awareness, because he was talking about something called innate intelligence and the nervous system. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. He was explaining that innate intelligence, there's this wisdom in our cells and our body that's always expressing life at 100%. It's always doing the best it can to heal. We never have to think about it. We cut ourselves. We don't have to force it to heal. It just does. We just have to give the body what it needs and help eliminate interference and help there be better connection. And so we're able to grow and to heal and to thrive. And that the master control system of that is the nervous system. It's the brain, it's the nerves, it's everything that connects to every cell, organ, and tissue of your body and is organizing how your body's able to function, to move, to sense and feel, to engage the environment, respond to all of these things. And I'm like, I didn't know what the nervous system was. I mean, I'd heard about the nerve, like brain and nerves and stuff like that. And, okay, maybe that's some psychology. But what he's saying is that it was all connected. It was all connected. And I'm like, yes, yes, it is. And he's talking about how even when our nervous system is experiencing certain things, it produces different biochemistry in the body that activates the immune cells and the glands and the hormones to express differently. And I was like, yes, yes, it does. And I was just so excited about that because in this philosophical shift of what he was looking at, it's like, this isn't about fighting disease, but how can you promote health in the body? And oh my God, I fell in love. And I just remember, going to see him for the first adjustment, and it just radically changed my life. And I said, if everyone could feel this good, it would change the planet. It would change humanity. This is what I want to do. And it was at that moment, and just there was this knowing. There was a knowing in that moment that this is the trajectory that I have to go toward. Because again, if this is the philosophy of what's going on in this practice, I want to be the best damn whatever that is at helping facilitate that process. And that was elevated again. There's three big shifts, and this is it. I'll pause. But on that last one, I'm going into chiropractic school, and I'm learning about the brain, and I'm learning about how, different parts of the brain organize in different processes in our physiology, our psychology, our emotional capacity, our autonomic or stress response. And it was, again, really fascinating. There was a certain point where even that was getting really mechanistic. But I'm like, where's that intelligence? Let's come back and recognize, how can we best serve that intelligence? Because there was still this operating, different modalities or adjustments or things you would do to the body were very more so therapeutic, meaning something was breaking down so that you had to supplement the body because it wasn't doing something right. And then I met Donnie Epstein, the guy who created network spinal care and all the different technologies that are now under the blanket term epienergetics. And to kind of sum up what I got to learn from him early on, and I'm just excited that this is what we get to explore, is he recognized that every system, a living system, yes, there is an innate intelligence, and there is matter that innate intelligence is organizing, whether it's our body, it's our relationships, it's our business, it's our family, it's our impact on the communities. That intelligence is always organizing things, and the capacity at which that living system can help impact and heal, again, individually or collectively, all has to do with the bandwidth or energy that it has access to in order to heal, in order to connect, in order to respond to all of these things. And now, rather than just looking at the parts and pieces, we look at how much energy does it have access to express life and complexity and intelligence coherently across all aspects of that system's expression. And the more connection and energy that it has, the more self-aware and self-organized it can be, the more adaptive it can be, but also the greater the impact it can create on the space around it. And so that really to evolved. I mean, really my perspective on what that innate intelligence has, if anything, just it keeps expanding, it keeps growing, because there is something that is animating us, that is allowing us to be alive and conscious and aware. And sometimes, in my own life, I was taking that for granted, but now it's we have this opportunity to, really further this movement of being able to appreciate that and bring that to the forefront of our awareness in terms of the impact that this is having on an individual and collective basis.
I love listening to all of that because it highlighted so many amazing things. Did you notice how each time you had a paradigm shift, how the energy would go up? You would get more excited because it's moving closer and closer to wholeness. It's first there's this experience of things are separate. You're looking at okay, what do we want to get rid of? What do we want to get away from? Looking at less. But the moment you shifted into more, how can I support this system, give it more of what it needs so it can grow, so it can thrive? And we're looking at the immune system, right? That system alone, the energy and the passion that would come out. As you're talking, I'm thinking, I never would have guessed that I could get so excited about the immune system or cells or the way we heal. Like, it's so funny, but it's not necessarily the system or the actual mechanics or the process. It's what animates it.
Yes.
It's the life involved in it and the laws that it operates by. And watching it is like magic. Observing it is in magic, whether it's how the body heals, how a relationship heals, how finances heal. It's the life that comes together in that intelligence. And that's what is so profoundly paradigm shifting when you start paying attention to it. And so that was a beautiful description of that. I still remember when I first discovered innate intelligence. I had always wanted to be same in some type of healing discipline. I was really passionate about the way the body worked, and I did massage for 10 years before I found chiropractic. But I remember the moment that it went from causality and trying to get rid of something and looking at the parts and pieces to the intelligence and what animates it all. I went to a Parker seminars. That's the college that we went to. They had a big seminar in Vegas, and I remember seeing Dr. Sigafus speak on stage. And he was talking about this baby that a mom brought into his office. And at this time, I'm still looking at like chiropractors come in, they fix something that's wrong, and then someone gets better. Maybe, a bone's out of place, you put it back in and they move better. That's my understanding of chiropractic. And as he's telling this story, he's talking about this mother who had lost all hope. She went to all kinds of practitioners, doctors. What had happened was her baby would stop breathing at night and it would turn completely blue. And she many times thought that she was going to lose her child. And a friend told her about this chiropractor, and it was last hope. So she goes to him like, please help me, please help save my baby. And he starts talking about innate intelligence and how it doesn't need anything. It just needs no interference, and how it's always operating at 100%. And what was going on was there was an interference to this intelligence really having all the resources it needs to help this baby thrive, to express life. And with one gentle adjustment, but really input of energy, the nervous system gained access to the resource it needed to express life at a fuller capacity. And, as he's explaining this, it wasn't the words that he said, it wasn't the mechanics, it wasn't any of that. It was what I felt. It's like the sky just opened up, a big, huge beam of light came into the room. And it's, it was a wild experience, because now this is a common experience for me, but it was a wild experience at the time. It felt like a God moment. For the first time experientially, not conceptually, it was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. And not even really what I've been looking for. This is what I have known has always existed. But now we're talking about it in a context where we can apply it and we can interact with it and we can be a co-participant with it. And I was like, this is what I have to do. And that's how I ended up at chiropractic school. And then again, okay, so here's the philosophy. This is amazing. And, some concept becomes reality. But then being exposed to network care, the care that we do in our office now. I remember my very first entrainment, backwards. The nervous system, you mentioned when you found out about the nervous system. Okay, first year of chiropractic school, the philosophy professor that we had was talking about how his wife had had an adjustment, and it was to the upper part of her spine where the brainstem is and has a lot of influence on that. She had one adjustment and the lights came on. Her whole life changed. And I remembered that story, and it was like, whoa, that was like the experience I was exposed to back on that stage in Vegas, listening to the story that Dr. Sigafus was sharing. And so right away, I'm like, oh, I have to go get this adjustment. Because at the time, it's like, okay, still obviously not embodying the idea that this innate intelligence is within all of us working all the time. I need to go out and I need to get something to give me that experience. And so I found a chiropractor that did the adjustment. And then he put me in a cervical collar, and he told me I couldn't move. I had to wear it for, it was like 3 or 4 or 5 days or something, or else the adjustment wouldn't hold. And so I'm sitting here like, whatever you say I have to do. So I put on the cervical collar, and I'm like, okay, anytime now, when are the lights going to come on? When are the lights going to come on? Yeah. And eventually I realized, okay, this isn't moving towards life. This can't be something that innately exists in all of us by nature if I have to not move my head for 7 days in order for it to magically appear. Right. And so I realized, okay, this isn't the way. And through chiropractic school, having all these different experiences get led to network. Now, fast forward to my first network entrainment. I remember walking into the office of that chiropractor, and instantly there was that light. There was the light that I saw on that stage. The room was full of it. I watched people so alive on these tables and their bodies animated in a way that I heard about in story, that I heard about on that stage, that I heard about in the baby, that I believed could be true and real, and that I know that I've felt but haven't really had this like reproducible experience. And there it was in every single person in the room. And I remember getting on that table and with one contact to my nervous system, which we'll get into more of what that really is, but I remember having the biggest breath I've ever experienced in my life. It went on for like, it felt like all the way out into space. Like I was all of a sudden just breathing in all of nature. It was such a wild experience. And afterwards, I remember walking outside and there it was. Everything was brighter. The leaves were neon green. The sky was bright blue. Like I could smell everything. Then it smelled amazing. It was like every sense was heightened. And it was like that was my moment where the lights turned on. And from that moment on, that was the embodied experience of this intelligence and what happens when it has the resources that it needs. My whole entire life changed. Everything changed. It's like the light didn't just come on inside my body, the light got turned on my life. And all of a sudden, I started to see things that needed to change, needed to shift, where I was operating out of my nature. And it's like everything illuminated. And then that's what sent me in the direction to here now having this conversation with you. And that's what's so exciting is that animates everything.
You know, it's interesting just over the past 120 plus years of chiropractic's existence. I mean, what you're explaining there, I feel like we're really in how our society and humanity is evolving and technology is growing. There's an even greater capacity to appreciate what this was always about in the first place. And I just sense that chiropractic has really, the whole as a field has really, is going through a reorganization and recognition of the difference between strategy and outcome. And what I mean by that is when we go and look at the inception of chiropractic in the late 1800s and D.D. Palmer, who was, you know, just this brilliant healer. He was studying healing. What does healing mean and how can you best help that? He recognized at some level that there is this, you know, energy field that the body and nervous system is organizing. And if you can help that field be more fully expressed through the body, that people can heal of really incredible things. And he realized, okay, you know, he had an understanding of basics of how the nervous system worked. You know, he said that the nervous system is really, and chiropractic is really founded on tone. That if you change the tension and tone of the nerve connection between your brain, the rest of your body, and as it relates to life, then you essentially alter consciousness. You alter our capacity to observe, process, and respond to what's going on outside, but then also you change the signaling that's going on inside as well. And his strategy of helping support that is he realized, okay, well, the spine, you know, he recognized the spine wasn't just some dumb stack of bones and muscles that just haphazardly goes into whatever position it needs to be in. He recognized that if there's like alterations in the position of the spine, that it changed the tension and tone on the nervous system, the spinal cord and nerves. Thus, it changed the communication between the brain and the body and changed healing potential. And so then he, you know, realized, oh, well, if we can help correct the position of the spine, thus changing the tension and tone of that spinal cord and nerve area, then therefore you can restore the connection, and with better tone, there's better communication and better adaptability, and then the body heals because that's what it was designed to do. And so now you're starting to see like that's the inception of chiropractic. And that's been further studied by, you know, his son, and throughout the years, there was just this brilliant focus, not just on fixing the spine, but it wasn't about that. It was about shifting the tone of the nervous system and helping that innate intelligence and that innate wisdom express the most fully it possibly could through one's body and life. You know, you said this on in several different ways, but you're talking about being lit up, feeling more light, like light itself. You had more light in your life, you had more energy. It's like the light of life, that animate force, that consciousness, that awareness that is allowing you to be alive, but then it's also allowing you to be aware of life at greater and greater levels. It's like the brighter those lights are turned on, the more whole your life is going to feel. And early in chiropractic, what that was called when you were not expressing life at your fullest capacity was this term called subluxation. And this isn't like the medical subluxation, which is like a dislocation. It means sub, less than the expression of light. Lux is light. And so basically you weren't expressing your fullest capacity for light and life. And so if you could turn that back on, if you can help there be a greater expression of that energy, then again, you're going to become more adaptable, you're going to thrive and grow. And this is that whole like strategy versus outcome challenge, is that all of a sudden, the strategy of putting the force into the spine to get things back into the right position essentially became the therapy later on. Initially, it was there to help restore the tension tone and to clear a subluxation, or to allow the greatest expression of life. But then people kind of got lost in thinking that it was just the adjustment that was what was making the change. And so there's a whole history and political shift where then, now there are a lot of the common expressions, even how insurance shows up and covers a lot of chiropractic really has more so to do with it as a manipulative therapy, meaning that you're just restoring joint dysfunction and biomechanics. It was never what it was about. It was always about the expression of that vitality and allowing that to express itself at the highest level possible.
And so you bring up a really good point talking about subluxation and alignment and position of the spine and tone of the nervous system. So why would you say that someone's spine would be out of alignment?
Oh, challenge accepted. I've realized more recently that your spine is never out of alignment. You're always aligning to something. Like I was saying earlier, the spine isn't just some dumb stack of bones and muscles. It is a highly intelligent, complex, very organized system whose primary job is to protect the spinal cord, which is really brain tissue that continues into your body. It's your central processing system. In fact, the spinal cord, is the interface between your central processing system and how you connect to your environment, whether that be your body or the surroundings around you. And I learned early that, if we're out of alignment, then we need to restore the alignment. But what I know now is it's not that your nervous system, again, is out of alignment, but this is the position of alignment. It's what your body, based on the connection, the amount of available energy, has in order to process a certain level of life. And if its bandwidth is limited compared to the amount of information that your nervous system is trying to process, then it's like sometimes we need to dim the lights a bit. We need to subluxate. We need to turn down the lights to make life a bit more manageable. And so then how the spine is designed is it starts to, bend, twist, and rotate to kind of pull on the nerves, pull on the spinal cord to kind of bring down that awareness so that you're not just so inundated and blasted with an experience, but at least you can adapt and survive at that level. And I think that requires a great deal of humility and appreciation for that innate intelligence. Like, why would innate intelligence, wanting to organize your life at the highest level possible, choose to decrease your awareness and your nervous system's capacity to experience life?
Exactly. The humility and the reverence for the intelligence that made the brain. It's like we think we know more than what actually created us, which is insane. Intelligence is always expressed at 100%.
Yep.
Always. And so if we start looking at things as an intelligent response, we're going to have a wildly different participation with it. And that was one of those magical moments for me too, where all of a sudden, instead of being a victim to my body or a victim to life or circumstances and all of this fear coming up, which actually degraded health because it separates me from the exact energy resource that creates healing and connection, looking at everything as an intelligent response. And I love talking about things from energetic terms because that's what we're really talking about. Your light is energy.
Yep.
So being illuminated, that's an increase in energy available. So next question. Do you think that your nervous system creates your reality or it's modulating the experience of reality?
Yes. Yeah, it's both. I mean, it really is, it's both. When we look at how the nervous system operates, your nervous system's job is to receive information, process the information and create a response based on its capacity at that point. And this is where, in order to really get this, you have to, let's just take the mechanism out for a moment, because everything that we experience through our senses, like, we can take for granted. Sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, like our basic senses, we really take for granted because it's been so much a part of us throughout our whole lives. Like, we think we identify with those senses. Well, the nervous system is what's allowing you to have an expression of those senses. It's allowing you to process that information, to create the experience, not just, photons hitting the back skin of your eye and then, somehow that creates sight and vision, or, these percussive movement of air particles and the air vibrates skin in our ears and it will create sound. Your nervous system is helping to experience the world around you and your place in it. So there's one aspect in terms of it's helping to at least facilitate that awareness, but then here's the biggest, paradigm shift even experiencing that is at what is your nervous system's capacity to make sense of how much information it can be aware of. So in this like dimmer switch analogy, in terms of the nervous system actually helping to like shape your experience of reality, you're not aware of what you're not aware of. You're only aware of what you are aware of. And you're only aware of it at the level of capacity that you have the bandwidth to be aware of it. And so what I mean by that is, in terms of awareness, in healing, okay, we've looked at the evolution of healing as an increase of awareness between, survival or wanting to fix something, wanting to manage something, wanting to express it at a higher level, and then also like, what is the greatest level of my life I can express at, to what impact, to what end? There's really no cap on the level of complexity, the level of healing, the level of impact that we can have on the world around us. And so to look at, on one end, how our nervous system is able to experience information, make sense of it, yes, it's facilitating at least that experience, but there's really no limit on what it can experience. I think about, to make it a really dumb example, it's like if you never have exercised a day in your life, and you start exercising, you're going to have a certain limited bandwidth of how much movement you can do before your body says metabolically, I can't go on. But what if you're well supported by, the world's best coach for a month, for a year, for 5 years, for 10 years? What is your capacity to express health and vitality? There's really no end to it. And I think that that's been a really big curiosity in modern times, is recognizing that, our reality is just really a lowercase r reality and isn't the reality, that we can increase our capacity to be present at greater levels and capacities, to have experiences beyond ourselves. We start getting into even more like spiritual connections to purpose and feeling and knowingness beyond ourselves. So what part of the nervous system facilitates that? Different pieces, but again, with an increased bandwidth, that's what allows us to have that experience versus just trying to get by day to day and survive.
Yeah, a really simple way that I like to explain it to people. If your nervous system has a certain amount of energy, you can view that as you have access to a certain pool of letters. I always think about like the alphabet soup. So you have a certain amount of letters.
Yes.
With these letters, you can make a set amount of words. Now, as your nervous system gets more access to energy, it now can process more information, so we can pour more letters into that soup.
Yep.
So we can make more complex words, different sentences, paragraphs now, and eventually storybooks. And so the complexity of what we're able to see and what we're able to engage with grows and grows and grows according to how much energy we have access to. And that is one of my most favorite things about network spinal care, the work that we chose to do. It helps your nervous system develop strategies to process information and energy more efficiently, to focus it, grow, and evolve, as opposed to just managing something or getting rid of something or using it as a therapy. This is a way for your nervous system to actually evolve, gain access to more energy and letters, and to be able to express at a more complex, vital way. And so can you talk more about that as far as the strategies to process energy and information, and what the difference between evolution and regulation. People like to use the word regulation, nervous system regulation versus nervous system evolution.
So two parts to that. One, in looking, like you're saying, treating something as a therapy versus looking at something as an evolving process. One, a therapy isn't going to increase capacity. A therapy is going to be able to help manage your body, your mind, your life, your mental, emotional state at the level that it can organize with whatever the budget is, however many letters it has, at whatever level of complexity it can organize those letters, so to speak, which is necessary. Again, when we're in breakdown mode, that is definitely a part of that healing journey, is that, hey, you got to help it out where it's at. But then there's the other part of that, where then people have been talking a lot more about nervous system regulation. Okay, great. What is nervous system regulation? First, before exploring that, because this is something that I feel like you're really brilliant at articulating, one of the biggest barriers and blocks to how we're able to function is when we go through experiences that challenge us and break us down and overwhelm us. So I wanted to look first at the nervous system's response to trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. Trauma and overwhelm. I love talking about this because I think that culturally we're conditioned to think that trauma has to be really big events. It's a car accident, it's a divorce, it's the death of a loved one. And ultimately, trauma can be anything that overwhelms our nervous system. And two people can have the same exact experience. And for one, it can be traumatic. And for the other, it can be a growth experience. And so what's really going on here, again, you have a nervous system with a certain amount of energy resources. When it's exposed to information, life information, whether that's physical, emotional, mental, whatever it is, life information, if it doesn't have enough energy to process that, integrate it, and make the shift and the change because of it, then it goes into a traumatized state where it actually takes that information and energy and it fractalizes it. And so it essentially just cannot process it. So a lot of people talk about how trauma is stored in the body. And really what happens is these little fractalized parts, these are reference points to an experience. It resonates with that experience. And the body and the nervous system, it separates it because it can't actually process it. So it walls it off. And essentially, then now it's just there for later. So we can actually process and heal it later if we get access to more energy resources, which sometimes does and sometimes doesn't happen. Yeah. And so that's really why you can have, two people in the same exact car, same exact impact. One person comes out of it with no injuries. And sometimes we even look at their nervous systems after they've been in these accidents and they get healthier, their heart rate variability goes up and they actually express at a greater level because they were able to take that impact, that information, they had the energy to process it. The body made the change to become more resilient and used it as a way to reorganize, as opposed to another person who it goes into fight or flight, that dimmer switch comes on. Now, all of a sudden we have tension in the body where this experience can't be processed, the energy can't move, and now we have tension on the spinal cord, which affects the way that our nervous system sees reality because everything's tone and vibration, and now they're experiencing two wildly different realities from that one experience. And so, long story short, that's a very compact version of how we respond, but ultimately it comes down to how much energy do we have available? How resourceful is our nervous system? Does it have strategies to resource energy? And that's, again, back to network spinal care. Why I'm so passionate about it, it's because, not only does it help us connect to what's already happened and process life and gain the wisdom from it, because that's really what stress is. Stress is not bad. It's information. And as we actually can process and integrate it, we get the wisdom from that. If not, then it's just trauma, right? And so it allows us to do that, but then it also allows us, once we do that, to move on and grow and evolve, to be able to take on greater and greater amounts of energy and synthesize it and grow from it and become more because of it. And, we talked about healing as a shift in our identity, like identifying again and again with larger and larger systems and really recognizing our wholeness and the part of the whole that we're a part of. But that's a lot of
It
information,
is.
you
Yeah.
know, and trauma. So it's so talked about now because our nervous systems are so overwhelmed with information now with the internet and how we can have information at the drop of a dime. You know, we have information about the entire world that we never would have been able to have before in a second, all the time, flooded with it. And so our nervous systems are overwhelmed. And so now is a more important time than ever to have nervous system support where we can actually start to grow from this instead of it being a toxin.
Yes, absolutely. You know, when to just look at that growth from, okay, we experience a trauma and that's like kind of like fragmented because we can't process the whole thing all at once. So we like break it into different components, and that experience can end up as these like, you know, areas of our body that hold on to tension. It's like this stuck on the loops of like protect, 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 creating that vigilance. And then how that shapes our life is not only can, you know, that constant looping experience create tension, disconnection, and then breakdown in our body, but also psychologically we're avoiding that pain as well. We're like, you know, not wanting to connect with certain people or go certain places, or we are connecting with certain people and going certain places that just resonate with whatever that loop is. It's like driving our psychology. It's just running our subconscious brain. And we can continue to experience that. And we have this one aspect of, you know, looking at, you know, to get out of pain, stop the bleeding, so to speak, when we're in crisis. How can we, you know, help better, you know, absolve the crisis and breakdown? But a common thing that we see, like we were mentioning earlier, is the regulation, which is how can you at least best help manage your life at that level of participation, meaning there's all these fragments of facilitation or hypervigilance loops that are playing out in the back of the nervous system. Let's at least help you manage with all of these things that are running. But then this is where the other side of that comes into evolution, of what you meant by what you said by getting the wisdom out of that experience. You know, when we see that the more that we've been living our lives avoiding or managing whatever that pain has been, and how that's really compressed and turned down that expression, and then all the thoughts, actions, functionality, symptoms that show up in our body, you know, what starts, leading from that experience, all of a sudden we realize, wow, our life was so limited. Now that that actually gets to heal, we get to reclaim our life. But it begins with the connection, but not about managing the circumstance, but bringing more awareness to it, starting to turn up the lights, helping there be more energy in that expression. All of a sudden, rather than those aspects being fragmented and held onto in different places, it's like they actually start growing again. We start reclaiming our life and vitality. We realize we don't have to hold ourselves back, that we were the greatest limiting factor of our life. And now that it's changing, again, it's a shift toward what can we grow toward more of versus what can we get away from. This is a big shift. You know, someone once said that you can, by studying disease and breakdown, that will never lead you to greater health and life expression. That if you want to express your life and vitality at a higher level, you have to focus on that. But that is the big shift from survival lens thinking to thriving, is how much more of my life can I actually begin to experience and express? And if you have a larger budget of energy to work with, more connection, vitality, are you going to be more or less likely to have injury or breakdown or challenge in your life? It's more it's a greater level of you showing up to meet those things. And so now, you know, that example where you shared where two people get into the same incident and one breaks down and one grows, with a high capacity connection, like now that challenge grows it grows the person, it grows the system and allows it to become more adaptable. And now it realizes that it can handle that and so much more. So now there's less restrictions on life. There's a greater capacity for that life expression and a confident coherence in expressing that way.
Yeah, and you know, this also affects the meaning we give to things. So,
Absolutely.
you know, when you're in a survival state, meaning there's not a lot of energy available, so any exposure to too much information all at once is a threat to our survival, we're going to see things very differently. Things are going to mean things very differently. Like if someone says something, we may take things personal because what if this is a threat to my survival? Where our
Yes.
whole lens is different than if we have an abundance of energy. The way that we observe life is going to be from that lens. And so this affects affects more than just the physical body. It affects how we know the world, the opportunities we see, how we respond and react in relationship, what we even see as available to us in many different ways. And so, last question, would you say that through network spinal care, as people are under care and their nervous systems are shifting, changing, becoming more resourceful, would you say that people are becoming different versions of themselves, or would you say that they're becoming more themselves?
I would say they're becoming less of who they thought they were
Yeah.
and more of who they were destined to be.
Yeah.
And this has everything to do with coherence. When we go through experiences, traumas, conditioning, that creates this fragmentation, so to speak. We, as not making it wrong, it's how we were designed to be on this planet. We survive, we move on, we do what we need to do to get by, to be included by the tribe or family so that we can continue on in our life. And then there's this moment or opportunity and that we can be blessed to have that is able to recognize, is this all there is? Is there something more that's available for me in this life? And as we have that level of self-awareness, there's a shift in meaning. There is an increased awareness and identity and your place in the world, the place in community. And now we shift from, being identified with the survival strategies, the conditioning, and we start participating in life consciously, coherently. And that can happen at ever greater levels of awareness because as we become more coherent, it becomes more obvious what resonates with that most coherent expression of our most aligned identity.
Yeah, I love when you talk about that because, the fragmentation and how we talk about, okay, now there's a reference point to that trauma or that circumstance. A lot of people talk about, well, your vibration, what are you attracting? You're the one that's making these experiences happen because it's your vibe or whatever, however you want to say it. But ultimately, it's resonance. And we resonate with similar experiences that seem to happen over and over again because we're meant to not be fragmented. We're meant to call those pieces home, to integrate it, to grow from it again. And now all of a sudden we're expressing coherence. We're all here. We're experiencing our wholeness. And from that place, like you said, we can now better sense what resonates with our authentic self.
Yep.
Our natural, coherent vibration, and as opposed to the traumatized one, as opposed to the fragmented one, as opposed to the one who thinks it's separate or isolated. It's now the one that's experiencing itself in its wholeness and in harmony with the whole. And so that's a completely different experience of life. The experience of synchronicity starts to show up. That was a really big one for me once my nervous system started to become coherent. All of a sudden, it just seemed like magical things would happen out of the blue. I would think about, oh, I need this thing, and this person would show up and they just start talking about this thing and they connect me with the next person. And it's this like magical thing that just starts to happen. But it's because I was coherent. All of a sudden, it's like I could see the things that actually resonated with me and with my authentic experience. And it was so amazing.
It's like that light we were talking about, the more coherent you become with that expressed version of you, that light gets brighter, and not just for you, but you start to light up and you can be seen to and inspire others.
And we recognize this is our nature. This is how it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
When it's not happening, that's when something's wrong.
It's supposed to be painful. Exactly.
Because there's this idea of, oh, that's just like, an experience that's had by a select few. It's like, this is our nature. Yeah. And when we're out of our nature, it doesn't happen. And that pain is an indicator that we're out of our nature and that we're experiencing ourselves in a way that's actually not reality.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. Awesome. I'm excited to explore more of this in the future, but this has been absolutely amazing exploration and inspiration today. So I look forward to more.
Yes.